Elon Musk is suing Media Matters. Who's going to win, Elon or Media Matters? Well, let's dive in. I have about three key points for you guys. So, first of all, many of you have probably seen that Elon Musk is going after this organization called Media Matters or Media Matters for America due to essentially some defamation, saying that some of his tweets or that the general platform of X, formerly known as Twitter, is anti Semitic and encourages far right behavior. Now, there's a very broad overview, but I'm kind of going to go over some things today. The first thing being is who's behind Media Matters? Who's Elon Musk actually suing? And this is where it gets really interesting. The guy behind Media Matters and the Media Matters empire is a guy named David Brock. Now, I've been following David Brock for quite some time. I was actually doing some research for this video, and I don't have oh, here's the case. So, this is a book that I read, I think probably, I don't know, 4 years ago. It's Cheryl Atkinson's The Smear. And if you haven't read it, you absolutely should. It's kind of an old book by now. It was written just after the 2016 election, or almost during. And it is an incredible book. It's not that long, but it essentially goes over the smear. It goes over how we have this entire media establishment and how it affects people, politicians, and essentially how everything you read is fake. Well, one of the key figures in this book by Cheryl Atkinson is David Brock. Now, you can look into David Brock. You'll find a plethora of information about him. He's one of those guys who I have a great deal of, I don't know if respect and admiration are the right word, but I'm definitely very impressed by him. He's an incredibly powerful man, especially on the Democratic Party, mainly because of his skill at dictating media. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you go through the book, you're going to see that David Brock's media empire is humongous. Now, David Brock used to be a Republican in the 90s. He kind of flipped that switch. He's now been a Democrat and probably the top Democratic media operative for the past 2 to 3 decades now, since switching over to the Democratic Party. But everything really changed post Citizens United when super PACs really came into play. So David Brock's empire really started, I think, right around 2010. And if you read some of this book, I have page like 117 open, which documents just some of David Brock's empire. I mean, I could list off, there's probably about 15 different organizations here. And mind you, all of these are media organizations. America Bridge 21st Century Foundation, and then that has a PAC that he's a part of. American Democracy Legal Fund, American Independent, American Priorities Joint Fundraising Committee, Bonner Group, fundraising group, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, Correct the Record Super PAC, Franklin Forum PAC, Franklin Strategies, Media Matters Action Network. And then even dives into all the organizations that pay this guy. Franklin Education Forum, Correct the Record, American Independence. He makes upwards of just these organizations in a year, $15 million. And I did some research on Bard, just kind of going more in depth and making sure some of these organizations are tied to him. And Bard's interesting because Bard, I won't give you everything right away, but it mentions Correct the Record, Media Matters, but then it goes further, kind of do my own research. He's a part of, let's see, what's some of the stuff that I Googled. America Bridge 21st Century, Priorities USA Action. And by the way, the most interesting part about David Brock's empire is if you look more closely at some of the organizations like America Bridge 21st Century, George Soros has actually donated at least $100 million to that organization. Priorities USA, another David Brock affiliate, George Soros donated over $150 million to. So there's a lot of crossover. I mean, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, the short acronym for that is CREW, Equality Matters, Political Correction Project, American Democracy Legal Fund. Oh, man, like the list goes on and on. Okay, so here's what you need to understand. This is what Elon Musk is up against when he's suing Media Matters. He's not just up against a single organization. He's up against the entire Democratic media establishment that has essentially been running the Democratic Party now for over a decade. And what I mean by that, and you can read more of that in Cheryl Atkinson's book, The Smear, is these organizations go from news media outlets to fact checkers to super PACs. And so the way that process would work is they develop a hit piece on somebody, then they'd have every single media outlet they own write or republish that hit piece. So now you have from one hit piece, 5 articles. Then say you own 3 or 4 fact checkers. So you have the fact checkers fact check your hit piece and say it's completely accurate. Then that shows up on the mainstream media news outlets and talking pundits to the where by the time you trace back this media to the original hit piece, you've taken too long and the damage is already done. And it's interesting because the central figure, the central point of failure for all this is this guy, David Brock, who once again, now hopefully you kind of get an idea of why I have so much, respect for this guy. I really need to think of a different word. At least an appreciation for the empire that he's built, even though I think it's being used for evil, not good. This is what Elon Musk is up against, right? So, can Elon beat that? I'm not entirely sure, but of course, he's making a jab at David Brock and his empire. And I think some of Elon's larger narrative is starting to attack Democrats, not necessarily directly, because Elon tries to play both sides. I mean, you see that with SpaceX. It doesn't matter what party you're a part of. If you're a government contractor, you want to keep everybody happy. But since his acquisition of Twitter, which Twitter in and of itself could probably compete with David Brock's empire in a large part. That's how powerful a platform it is, and hopefully will continue to be. Now you got to get in. Now you kind of get a real idea of what's actually happening. So it's not just Elon Musk versus Media Matters. It's Elon Musk versus David Brock and his enormous Democratic media empire. And I can't go over all the details, even though I've given you some in this video. But that's the first point. So this looks like a simple lawsuit. It's not. It's incredibly politically charged, and it's humongous, and it's a jab at the Democratic establishment's entire media network. Point number 2. So points number 2 and 3 are actually going to look at tactics and probabilities of him actually winning the case. So one of the landmark cases when it comes to suing media, because media is incredibly tough to sue. There's this balance between freedom of speech and our First Amendment and our right to privacy. And media is kind of in this, meshy in between, right? That, we kind of only see instances of the in between when we have lawsuits. So one of the coolest and I think most landmark lawsuits that actually has to do with media and that I can kind of relate for Elon Musk would be Hulk Hogan suing Gawker. So this is definitely before my time, and I didn't even know a lot of this happened until maybe 4 years ago. But Hulk Hogan, in short, had a sex tape that was released, and he sued the media outlet that found that sex tape and published it, essentially saying that, hey, this was a super private matter. They leaked it. They violated my right to privacy. So he sued them for it. And the media outlet essentially said, well, you're a public official, you're a public figure. We found this. It's our job to report on it. And as a media organization, we have a right to do so. Well, Gawker actually lost, and it was actually one of the biggest hits for any media news organization, and a big win for media personalities and celebrities in general, because now it showed that if media oversteps their bounds, you can actually kind of fight back. And Hulk Hogan's, showed that. And so the Gawker versus Hulk Hogan, which if you want to look it up, it's actually Bollea versus Gawker, because Hulk Hogan's real name is Terry Gene Bollea, which I would have never guessed. If you look into that, you're going to see how Hulk Hogan actually used some of the privacy laws to fight back against big corporate media. And Gawker at the time was pretty infamous. It's kind of like one of those tabloids, and you see tabloids posting ridiculous stuff all the time, but they're not necessarily always getting sued, right? So there's a fine line between what you can publish in media that's simply freedom of speech and talking about what's public and open, and getting too personal into someone's life. But that court case set a lot of precedent, similarly to how the approval of Citizens United set the precedent for super PACs to now become a mainstream political weapon, especially for people like David Brock. Gawker's closing and loss of that lawsuit with Hulk Hogan essentially set precedent for people to start attacking large media narratives, which, by the way, if you look at David Brock's organizations, that's one of the reasons why there's so many of them. Not only does that give the appearance of separate thoughts, even though none of these thoughts are separate because they're all created by one man, but also means is who do you sue to shut down? It creates this kind of behemoth, this creature, so to speak, with multiple tentacles that you chop one off, it just grows two more. I forget what that creature's called. I'll probably remember it after the show. Hydra. Hydra. You cut one head off, it just grows two more. But how do you sue 25 different organizations, right? You can go after the person, but that's sometimes even harder, especially if they're not an executive, they're just a paid board advisor or a consultant, right? So this gets very tricky very quickly. The other big thing you guys need to know when it comes to the Elon Musk versus Media Matters case are anti-SLAPP laws. And that doesn't mean like slap in the face, it's actually SLAPP. That stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. Okay, what does that mean? It essentially means that people, governments, organizations can sue you simply as an intimidation tactic. We see this happen all the time. That's why a lot of people settle, especially they settle with the federal government. So if you're the federal government and you want someone to not do something, or you're a giant organization, let's say you're a big oil company, you can sue a smaller competitor, even if it's completely frivolous, knowing that just the court and legal fees will bankrupt that person. So they're pretty much screwed, right? Anti-SLAPP laws are essentially laws that are passed by state legislatures to say, okay, well, this is a defense against that. Just because you're a big guy doesn't mean you can just sue small people into intimidation. And it actually offers a subset of protections for people who can't afford being sued by these big guys. You can essentially say, hey, I'm applying the anti-SLAPP law. I think you're just bullying and intimidating me. That's why if you look, Elon Musk is suing Media Matters in Texas. And Texas has some of the strongest anti-SLAPP laws, which is a double-edged sword. He also sued them in a very conservative district in Texas, which I believe has some Trump appointees, showing you the political nature of this. So isn't that interesting? Elon Musk is suing a Democratic operative organization, Media Matters, in the state of Texas, which is very red, in a district that is very red with Trump court-appointed appointees. So if that doesn't tell you this isn't political, then I don't know what does. But these anti-SLAPP laws could work for both Elon and Media Matters in the sense that Elon could say, listen, Media Matters produced a hit piece. They're trying to intimidate me, so I'm suing to protect myself. This is defamation. On the flip side, Media Matters could argue literally the exact same thing and say, Elon Musk is simply suing us to shut us up, right? What we did was we verified that Twitter is exposing right-wing content more so to the public, or right-wing extremist content, I should say, more so to the public, and pumping that out, and that we were factual. So now he's just simply trying to intimidate us with this lawsuit. So who's going to win? I'm not entirely sure. That's a pretty tough bet. I don't think Elon Musk, we tend to think that he's, this tech political guy. He is obviously incredibly smart, but he's getting into waters that I don't think he's ever been in before. And that comes with the responsibility of now, owning Twitter, which in and of itself is a gigantic media resource. If he treated Twitter like David Brock treated Media Matters, there would be no doubt in my mind that he'd have a bunch of his personal political agendas accomplished. But Media Matters is a behemoth of an organization. Not only that, but someone like David Brock has been doing this for 3 decades. I mean, he was a media guy even in the 90s. So he's not stupid. He knows how to write a hit piece. So Elon Musk is definitely poking the bear. It doesn't help that our current president, Joe Biden, is a Democrat. And Media Matters still played a role in 2016 and 2018. Now, David Brock put a lot of his bets on Hillary Clinton in 2016, and she lost. There was a huge blow to not only his reputation, but his empire and its funding as a whole. So if Hillary Clinton had won, man, would he be an even more powerful guy. But she didn't. right? And so even though he's still relevant, I don't think he's as relevant as he could have been, because now you had new players who've cropped up since the Biden administration won back in 2020. But he's still a big player. He's still heavily networked, and he still has all the connections in the world. I think some of the implications we should take from this is if you read Cheryl Atkinson's book, The Smear, or if you just research David Brock and his media empire, one question it brings to mind is, what's real and what's not. Part of living a democracy, I think, is having an educated populace. But can you really have an educated populace when the majority of your media outlets are actually owned by one person, all for a specific targeted political agenda? Is that really democracy? Is it really democracy if the people who are voting don't have the correct information or have been so subdued with propaganda that it's not really their vote, it's someone else's? Marketing is very powerful. Two, how is this going to affect Elon Musk at large? Is it going to change the base of his supporters? Is it going to further create this dichotomy in his network where he's now viewed and pushed to the right, even though he's tried his best to, I think, be center, if not even center left? If you look at Elon Musk's donations to political parties, he's donated plenty to Democrats. He's obviously still very highly praised by certain factions of the Democratic Party. And that is, of course, because of SpaceX, because of Tesla, trying to be environmentally friendly. But now he's stepping in some very uncharted waters. And I think it's made the current establishment not too happy. Third point is politics is dynamic. And you really need to understand that, because what Elon Musk is doing is causing shifts in alignments and parties, even within his own network and frame of mind. So now he's almost having to pick a side, and he himself, he's placing bets. This almost seems like he's placing bets that Democrats aren't going to win in 2024, which is potentially why he's being so aggressive. Which, if that's true, that means if Republicans win in 2024, I would expect to see Elon Musk actually become a more prominent political figure and even get more influence. It's no coincidence, I think, that the Biden administration actually, sued SpaceX or slapped some fines on them for whatever the reason. I know it wasn't the real reason that's stated. It's obviously a political hit. If you have a Republican in office, I doubt that's going to happen. So Elon Musk himself is betting, and he obviously must feel like he's in a pretty safe position to say some of the more recent things that he's saying. So who's going to win the lawsuits? I don't know. And I don't think the lawsuit is really the point of this lawsuit. I think this is actually just Elon Musk versus the Democratic media establishment. If Republicans are smart, they're going to get behind him and use this as a chance to cripple the Democratic media establishment. I don't know if they're smart enough to do that. We'll find out. Maybe Elon Musk doesn't want that because it's going to paint him more Republican and he wants to be careful with his optics. I don't know, but for him to even do this is more than just saying you guys are defaming me and my platform. This is obviously a hit. So we'll see how this goes. This might be long and drawn out, but I think this is going to be one of the highlights of Elon Musk's careers and personal lives, because if he loses this, Media Matters will have shown its strength, and it will have shown that with all the media power in the world, you can still take on someone like Elon Musk. It doesn't matter how influential you are. Knowing how to create the right hit piece and use lawfare, lawsuits is legal warfare, can in the end of the day get you what you want.